Before we get into Shudder Sundays this week, I noticed while I was editing this that I kept referring to Olin Boone's character as Declan. I don't know why. I looked up the IMDb and I just kind of wrote that down in my cast notes, and for whatever reason, I just kind of kept going off of that character's name. So instead of redoing the entire thing, just pretend every time I say Declan, I'm referring to as Olin Boone. Sorry about that, but enjoy Shudder Sundays, Oddity.
Shudder Sundays, number 18, I believe this is. Mm-hmm. And we are finishing up our month of our recap of 2024, following up on our best of Shudder style series. But this week we're going into Oddity, sort of a supernatural haunted house style horror.
Could you open the door?
What do you want?
You're in trouble.
He took my sister's life. I want to see what was going through his mind.
Released July 19th, 2024, and this was directed by Damian McCarthy, who this was his second feature film. His first one was Caveat.
Oh, okay.
I've heard
of I haven't seen it, but I've heard of Caveat.
I heard it had sort of similar-ish vibes, but I haven't caught up to it yet. But now, after seeing Oddity, I might have to kind of backtrack on his career and check out this, because it's... We'll get into Oddity. This is starring Carolyn Bracken, who played Danny and Darcy Timmons, the twins that we'll get into, or sister. I think they're sisters.
Sisters, yeah.
This is the name of Ted Gwillem Lee, I think is how it's possibly pronounced. But that was Ted, the husband, and he was actually in Bohemian Rhapsody.
I thought he looked a little familiar.
Yeah, he was the only one that was really familiar looking for me for everybody else. But you had Johnny French playing Declan, who was also in Caveat. And then you had Steve Wall, who played Ivan, who had a part in Dune Part 2 and The Witcher. But this is sort of like an Irish-style horror. Not that really defines a genre. I don't think Irish horror is as prevalent as, like, if you say Japanese horror or Korean horror, you kind of can understand the vibe. But this was Irish-led film. So why don't you give a short little synopsis of Oddity for us?
All right. Darcy is a blind oddity shop owner that holds special powers within her that can connect her with the afterlife. After the devastating loss of her sister, she is determined to find out really who murdered Danny.
Yes, a little mystery involved in this one as well. So, Shudder Skull rating. Do you know what this one was?
I think this one's a 4 out of 5 skulls.
This is a 4 out of 5 Shudder Skull rating. Now, into Rotten Tomatoes, where things get a little bit more dicey sometimes. The critic rating. What do you think the critic rating is for Oddity?
78.
At the time of when I took these notes, it was a 96 critic.
Really? I knew it was pretty good, but I was like, maybe I'll give it too much credit if I go that high. That's really good.
What about the audience? Where do you think the audience landed on Oddity?
Lower.
It is lower.
92?
77.
Like, I was closer to the...
So,
I feel like I always get them backwards,
time. This was, I mean, obviously both very good scores, and we'll get into why. But I just generally was surprised about this. I went into this knowing nothing. I kind of saw the poster. I had seen it tossed around for a while. I never watched the trailer. More often than not, I do watch trailers. I like to have an idea of what I'm getting into. I know some people like to kind of go in completely blind, but I like sort of having an idea of what style, at least, movie I'm going to be into. But overall, this was a really fun, tense, atmospheric horror, I think is a good term for this, because that plays a huge role in this film, which is, there really was only like 3 settings, one barely used, because it's primarily in their house, and then you have a little bit of the facility that Ted works at, the psych ward, and you have a little bit in the Oddity shop, just like maybe a scene. But other than that, it's primarily those 2 settings. It does have, for me, maybe not full Conjuring vibes, but very Haunting of Hill House style vibes.
We were talking about that after, and I was saying how it kind of reminded me of Blind Manor as well, and the girl's name is Danny, and I was like, that was fun, but definitely with the little ghosties and stuff that are in this gives that kind of feel.
And I did only watch this through once, and I would like to go check it back again because I'm curious if it has that rewatchability like Haunting of Hill House, where there's these hidden ghostly imagery in the background, because
Right.
I noticed a couple, and it's those moments that like they scare you so much without any jump scare like sounds or alerts. You just like, it's one of those things you sort of catch and you're like, oh, whoa, what was that? There was something weird that you freeze frame it. You're like, oh, that was fucking creepy. So I had that very Haunting of Hill House style vibes. Who leaves their, whatever her would be, her ex sister-in-law?
Yeah.
That's what she would be to Ted.
Yeah.
Who leaves your blind ex crazy sister-in-law at your house home alone? Like just being like, I know she was pushy.
Odd to begin with.
I know she was like pushing to stay there, but in the movie, she kind of invites herself to their home, bringing this creepy
For Danny's like anniversary, the anniversary
her
of her death.
anniversary 1 year. And, you know, she said that they'd made plans to have dinner, and it was kind of one of those misconstrued situations.
She was like to Ted, she was like, oh, you don't remember you invited me over? And he was like, well, we kind of talked about it, but never really
She definitely was
invited you."
imposing herself there. But he had to go to work, and his new girlfriend was, like, trying to leave because she didn't want to be involved in this.
Yana.
And it just led to the situation of being like, fine, you can stay here. I'll be home after dinner. Like, that would... I guess she was like imposing herself, but it was just such an awkward situation. And there was a moment where you said Yana lost her keys, and she asked the blind lady, Darcy, right?
Yes.
If she has seen her keys. I thought that was a little like, you knew something like that was coming for sure. And this was, I think the best way that I describe this movie is chilling. It was I was uneasy watching a lot of this. This was a very
Unnerving.
stressful
Uneasy.
movie where, like I said, the atmosphere plays a lot in it, where it's this very old style, I don't want to say cottage because it's big in scale, but it has that old architecture where it's all like rock style slating.
Stone and then like wooden like fixtures, I guess.
Yeah.
Or...
So the beginning of the movie was essentially them renovating this house to live in, and on the night of the murder, what was the wife's name? Danny and Darcy. I keep getting mixed up. But yeah, on the night of Danny's murder, Declan, a character that you sort of learn a little bit more about, kind of knocks on the door and alerts her that, and this is a very creepy situation, that she ran out to her car really quick and went back in the house, and he alerted her that somebody went into the house without her seeing.
I am telling you that there is someone in there with you.
And it's kind of this like really like tense situation of like, do I trust this really odd looking stranger to tell me the truth, or like is he trying to get me out to attack me? And he's like, and his case that he's making is pretty convincing, because she's like, I'm going to call the cops. He's like, good.
Call them.
please call the cops because somebody's in the house with you. And you can see the back and forth of like, do I believe him? Do I not? Like, so, and it leads you to believe that on that night, Declan murdered her. And it's an interesting way that they tell this story, because they leave you with a little bit of this information, and you go into the movie having that in the back of your mind. And then as the story unravels, you start to learn more and more about what happened actually that night, who was really involved with the murder.
And it's not like this was just some random guy either. This was one of Ted's previous patients.
Who had just been released. And you come to find out later on down the road, obviously we talk all spoilers in these in these videos, but it was actually Ted who had hired Ivan, who was like this pretty sketchy security guard at his facility,
kind of thing,
like a ward guy,
like
to go kill his wife, because he didn't want to divorce her, because he didn't want to lose the house. He couldn't lose the house because he sunk everything he had into it. It seemed, and we'll get into the bad of this movie, but for me that seemed like just a convenient storytelling thing. Like, I feel like there should have been more reason
little
for
more
him
depth
to
to it.
murder her or want her murdered, or like there's an easier situation.
Because even Ivan was like, why don't you just divorce her? He was like, because she loves me.
Yeah, and it's like he'll never get over me. It's like,
so you're gonna murder her instead?
it's a little bit of a stretch to believe, but either way, come to find out that Darcy was kind of suspicious as well, and being this psychic, she's got these abilities to kind of touch objects and read them.
Yes.
Which she mentioned by the example of she touched like a guy's wedding ring and had to learn that he had been unfaithful, something like that. So I'm going to assume that she had touched something of Ted's where that's kind of what kickstarted these out, you know, the mind going.
And it's interesting too because in The Haunting of Hill House as well, I forget her name off the top of my head, but when she touches people, she could like feel their emotions or like read their mind kind of thing. So I was like, oh, that's another little fun tie-in.
Some similar little things tying in there, but so that's kind of what I had for the notes of this, and we'll discuss it more in our segments. Do you want to do anything else before we get into our topics?
Yeah, I think
All right, so let's get into our good. What did you have for the good on Oddity?
So there was some really good jump scares in this.
Put them back!
I feel like I haven't gotten a good jump scare from a movie in a while. There's a couple different scenes in particular, and I feel like a lot of this movie was very dimly shot or was very dark.
Yeah.
So when we were watching it, it was pretty cool. I feel like this would have been a pretty cool theater experience to go see it there. But another thing I had, what else? The storyline. So for me, it was a little difficult with the storyline because I had tried to watch this previously for Shudder Sundays a couple times, and I couldn't really get into it at the beginning, but once it started going, it really started going, which was nice too. So I just wish there could have been a little bit more of a kickstart at the beginning to reel me in a little bit.
And I sort of had something along those lines, and I'm kind of piggybacking off of what we talked about in last week's episode within A Violent Nature. The director had said something that stuck with me into this movie where it's like, you know, the horror audiences are just not patient enough. And I feel like this movie was what he thought In a Violent Nature was going to be, where the patience was rewarded in this movie.
It did have a payoff to it.
It did take a little while to get going. It was a bit of a slow start. Those always, maybe I'm just dumb, but like those movies that sort of splice stuff like that, it takes me a couple watches to at least fully understand where I'm at in the story. So when it started right off the bat, the death, and then it cut to like sort of present day, I was kind of thrown off a little bit. I was like, wait, and not only that, but having the same actress play both characters, both sisters, it was like
I didn't know that.
She played
Is
both
that
of them.
when you had said that, I was like, maybe he just misread it. Really?
I'm pretty sure.
That's cool.
I'm pretty sure. I'll follow up on that.
Darcy and Danny were the same character?
I believe it was the
Maybe
same
I just couldn't
actress.
tell because her blonde hair and it just looks so different.
But for me, it was a little bit of like, that's one of the things that threw me off. Yeah, she played Danny and Darcy.
That's fun.
So that threw me off a little bit. And obviously they changed in appearance, but it was similar enough where I was like, is it like in the future? Like,
that is one thing that you've always had a difficulty with when characters look too similar.
Yeah,
no.
I hate it because it happens a lot, especially in horror movies, I think.
I was just going to say it does happen in horror a lot,
typically,
especially.
it's like you're talking a slasher movie, and I know we're getting off track, but we'll come back in. But like a slasher movie, you got like 6 blondes.
I was just going to say a bunch of hot blondes.
They're all named like, you know, like this is Jennifer and Tiffany and Michelle, and it's like I can't keep track of like, especially when the characters aren't super different, like character wise. Like when they have similar traits, it's like okay. But either way, this was a test of patience, and I think this pays off in a good way.
I did want to add that I really enjoyed the paranormal kind of aspect to it as well. The big wooden...
The wood guy?
The wood guy? So that was me trying to piece it together, I guess, too. So I would assume...
Fucking stupid thing.
From
Groot,
what I
evil Groot.
interpreted from an evil Groot, right? That's a good one. From what I interpreted is this was the tool that Danny and Darcy used to communicate through each other, or this is what Darcy used to communicate to Danny, because there's a scene early on before Yana leaves the house after finding her car keys that were hidden by the ghostly spirits. She looks at the back of its head, and it's kind of like enough fingers for like a bowling ball to like go into. That's exactly what I thought too. And she pulls out like a strand of hair, like a vial of blood, like a couple different like notes and stuff. So I was like, Is that Darcy's or is that Danny's?
So I took that as that was... I didn't view that as a communication mechanism. She said that this was a gift that her mother received from, like, witchcraft or whatever.
Right.
So I think all of those pieces, I think that was, like, Darcy's hair, Darcy's blood. I think... And the
so you think it was Darcy's, not Danny's?
Correct.
And this is what Darcy uses
to
that's
kill
what,
her. I think because it has... I view it as, like, her blood, her hair, and then those pictures were her memories.
That's kind of the track I was on, too. Because the picture of her and Danny when they were kids was in there as well.
So I think it's just her memories to take over and embody this creature to kind of control it and have her do her bidding. Because we come to find, like, this is how she killed Declan. And this is how, at the end, she controls it to kill Ivan. So that I viewed all those little pieces inside of it. It's like you put your pieces of you into this.
Right.
It's not specifically just hers. I think it's to whomever it wants to take control of it. You pop your stuff in there, and it's like a battery.
And speaking of that little wooden guy, too, it was really fun how you were talking about earlier doing a rewatch of this just to see if we missed any, like, little pieces in the back that we couldn't see. I did always like in the different shots that when you would see when the camera would pan over, the wooden guy would kind of be in different positions.
Yeah.
Or it was very subtle,
eerie.
too. He would either be, like, sitting at the table, or he would be, like, turned slightly from the table, or then he would be, like, the chair facing around the other way.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I thought that was fun.
But I had jump scares on there as well. I think they were well earned. The atmosphere overall was really cool. Just kind of sort of this house or compound that was sort of isolated.
It looked like it was like a big estate, like in rural.
Yeah, which is weird that
backcountry.
It did look like it was a full estate. And you take it as it's his whole house, but then really inside the house, we only see a couple little
It seemed very
places.
Small.
We see just the kitchen and the bedroom upstairs.
So maybe this was a townhome estate that it was all connected,
Yeah.
but it looked literally like when you pull into it's set up very interesting because it's kind of like
It's a square,
garden
like,
area that you're walked into, but it's a big square. Yeah.
I liked the wooden man, whatever the name was. That was proper term for the wooden man. And then I did like how the story was sort of woven in between each other. It's because it was two kind of storylines. It didn't get too crazy. There's other movies that do all kinds of different storylines, and it gets
Kind
a
of
little
gets lost in
jumbled.
translation.
But that's what I had for the good. So the bad.
Yeah.
What did you have for the bad for this?
So I wouldn't not necessarily consider this a bad. I was kind of going to add in the good as well. I really was intrigued by the oddity shop and looking at the different things that Darcy was holding and admiring, I guess, and getting that, not memories in her head, but feeling the powers from the different objects that she's collected over time. And I kind of wish they dived more into, like, the other stuff in the oddity shop. I feel like we just had that one early on scene, and it didn't really get to give the full vibe of it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was really cool. I'd like to know some of the backstories behind some of the other pieces, and we kind of dive into one of them, which I thought was a fun tie-in. We'll talk about that more at the end, but...
Yeah, I had in my what would you change, I was going to lean a little bit. I had two, and one of them was more of the Sisters Oddity store, so I'll put that in my bad as well. I would have liked, especially being called Oddity.
Yeah.
I was kind of, when I saw that store, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool, like, this medium, like...
Right.
It was an interesting story that seemed to, like, kind of just branch off and not be talked about too much. We talked about the patience aspect. It did drag a little bit.
Just at the beginning, honestly, the ending didn't seem like it was dragged out, because I feel like that's either like the kicker or the killer for me, is like if the ending is too slow and I can't really get into it. But I feel like the ending is a little bit easier to get into because you can at least wait for something to happen. When the ending is too slow and you're kind of waiting for it to come, it kind of...
Once the ending portion started, it did not let up.
No.
It was relentless. It was a lot of scares, a lot of back and forth. It was really cool. But it did just take a little bit to get there, which I guess is
like,
fine.
oh my gosh,
but,
moments like...
Yeah, but I do think maybe it could have gotten trimmed, or at least what I'll talk about in my what you would change. I just would have made adjustments, I guess. And it sort of was a little predictable for me. Just because I think the lack of cast, there was only so many places it can go. It's not going to be a stranger. Obviously, if it's not what we thought, it wasn't Declan. The sister didn't kill herself. The sister didn't kill her. So, like, you're only left with two possible suspects. And wouldn't you know it, they were in cahoots together.
And we were watching this, and you were like, you know what? I think it might be Ted. And I didn't say anything. I was just trying to get into it. But I was like, this Ivan guy seems a little suspicious.
Yeah, it was like,
and I was like, they're probably in on it together. And lo and behold, they were.
Yeah. So it just didn't. It
didn't make it bad, though.
No, it just didn't feel. I don't know how to say it without being bad. It's not like I've seen something 100% like this before, but it also didn't seem like a completely mind-blowing, fresh idea. Mm-hmm. It seemed like the setting was cool, they had this cool piece of that wooden man, and then the story was kind of basic. That's how it seemed to me, but again, I really did enjoy this. So, what was your top moment from this?
So, my top moment, did you do a top kill?
No, I just do
this
moments.
One too? Okay, so I
moments.
like the moments too, because I could add this in here. So I had 2 top moments on here, and they were both kills, actually. But, actually, not really. So, one of my top moments, spoiler, I know we've said before that we preface that we do spoilers in this, but the ending scene when Ted goes back to the house, Yana calls him, she's like, I don't know what the fuck you're still doing at that house after 2 people have already died there, like, you're crazy if you think I'm coming back. And he pulls up to the home and receives a package at the door, and when he opens the package at the table, it's the bell that was in the shop, Darcy's shop, that she was saying was haunted by a bellhop that had passed away from a hotel years ago. It didn't really dive too much into the story, but it was just such a fun scene to thinking, like, he's going to push the bell, he's going to ring the bell, and if you ring the bell, he appears, and you were like, he's going to ring the bell, just because he's like, oh, there's no ghost and this and that, and
one last temptation.
What is this blind lady thing she's talking about? It's kind of how he made it seem, kind of infiltrating her in that sense, but he rings the bell and kind of passes by a couple minutes and he laughs it off or whatever, and then the ending shot is just him and the camera's a little bit backed up sitting at the table kind of smirking, and then the ghostly bellhop is like right behind him.
Yeah, I liked that ending.
Yeah.
My top moment was when Yana, the girlfriend, was like having that final freak out night when the camera started flashing.
The camera stuff was scary. I forgot about the camera stuff.
So they find the camera of Danny, and it's like all these older pictures of their relationship, and then it sort of starts showing pictures of the night she was killed in the tent, and it's like click, 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 and it shows one of like the killer there. So it shows the killer in the background.
She's like telling Ted, she's like, you don't see what's wrong with this picture, and she's like zoom in on it, and it like shows like the guy in the mask, and
but it was kind of a big freak out moment for her, and she finally sees the ghost of Danny. And freaks out, finally gets her keys and vacates the premises. So I like that was kind of like the tensions it's the boiling point.
Yeah.
That's when shit was getting wild, and she did what most people in horror movies don't. She actually just got away.
She dipped. She really did. Never came back. Good for her.
So what would you change about Oddity?
I did have one more thing I wanted to add that I thought was fun. Yeah, sorry. This is a little bit earlier on in the movie, kind of when they show the killing of Danny. It's a very brief scene, but it's shot really cool. It's the yellow tent with the one kind of like lantern over in, so it's just like lit by that, and it's in the attic of the house where they were staying. They're remodeling it, so she was staying in a tent. I don't know. Anyways.
It was like the basement. That was like the living room area.
It was like the,
Right
yeah. And so she was staying in the tent, and it flashes from the intruder coming in the tent after Danny was in there, and then it flashes to blood splatter all over the inside of the yellow tent, and then just goes back to the regular cutscene. And I was like, man, that was cool.
It was a good little cut.
Fun little cut, yeah.
What would you change about this movie, about Oddity?
Probably, how I'd mentioned before, a little more insight to some of the different items from the Oddity's shop and stuff like that. And then maybe a little bit, I know we got a bit from Darcy of her explaining how it's been passed down from her mother and stuff like that, the wooden man, but
give it some more backstory.
I'd like to know more about that guy, yeah.
I know I'm very hypocritical. I always go back and forth on what I say and what I want, and that's fine. But I would have extended the beginning a little bit more to show more family dynamic. I wanted to see Ted and Danny together. I want Ted to be a better husband, so that way that swerve is...
This could set for a good prequel film.
I mean, at this point, it's wasted. It doesn't matter now.
Yeah.
But I want to see more of Ted being that hardworking, good husband. So that way, when the swerve comes, it's more impactful.
A little more surprising.
So you're like, oh, I definitely didn't see that coming. So I wanted to see some more family dynamics. I would have liked to see Darcy and Danny interact with each other, so that way I cared more when Danny died. Because when you start a movie off with a kill, I don't necessarily care for that character. And with this movie, limited cast, I feel like the core of it is caring about these individuals, and I didn't care about the wife really at all. And I didn't see any connection with her and her sister, so it makes me not feel for Darcy as much as I probably should have.
She was such a big point in the film that I wish she actually got more screen time and that we got to know her a little bit better.
So who is this for? Who would you recommend Oddity to?
I feel like Oddity's a good movie for any kind of horror genre you're really into. I feel like it has the supernatural, it has the jump scares, it has the bit of, how would you explain it, ambiance to it, that unsettling,
atmosphere.
unnerving kind of feeling. I mean, I was telling Nick when we were watching this, I was like, that's probably one of my worst fears whenever we go and walk the dogs and come back and we don't know if someone came in the house or something. Oh, it's just so creepy. That same night, I was like, just checking around in here, making sure no one popped in.
But yeah, I would, if you're into that Haunting a Hill House style vibe, Conjuring, I guess, I'd give this a shot. It's
A
definitely
little witchy, kind of?
Yeah, it's definitely that unnatural, tense horror. It's less scary, like in your face, and it's more tension building, I would say. So
Tense is a good word, I think. Tense, unsettling.
yeah. So fear and beer scale, a 1 through 5 rating of your fear, how scary this was, and your beer, how much did you enjoy this? What was your fear rating for Oddity?
My fear rating on Oddity, excuse my mix-up, was a 3.5.
Okay.
I got a couple good scares from this. At some point, I was like, ooh!
I will match your 3.5. I was thinking of going a little higher.
Really?
But it's a very tense movie. Even when stuff is not scary, it's
And
still
it's when
scary.
you don't expect it either. And a lot with, I didn't talk too much about the score with this. I know I usually do for other films we've reviewed on here. And there wasn't too much of a score to this film.
No, it wasn't. It was
which
minimal.
I think built the suspense even more, because when you're doing these shots of them just being in the house at night and when all the lights cut off and it's pitch black in there and you're in complete silence watching it, like, it just builds that anxiety.
Yeah, it's very tense. It does put you in that atmosphere of walking around a very dimly lit
It just feels
house.
like a cold movie.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to explain it,
Yeah,
but
it's chunk. So your beer rating, how much did you enjoy this, 1 through 5?
I gave this a 3.
A 3? We're pretty on it. I'm giving that a 3 as well.
I thought you would score it a little bit higher than I would.
Yeah, I enjoyed this one. I don't know how much I will go back to it.
That's my thing.
I will probably watch it one more time to see if there are any of those like little hidden ghosties in there. But I did enjoy this. I think if it was, I don't know what would have pushed me there more. I think caring about the characters would have pushed me a little bit higher. Maybe a bigger cast and a little less predictable. I think it probably would have done it for me. But overall, I do enjoy this movie, so I'll stick with the 3 for my beer rating on
I think
this
it's
one.
a fair rating.
Yep. So that is it for Shudder Sundays. Check back on our socials. February 1st, we are going to be announcing our slate for February.
Woo!
So be sure to find us on Instagram. That's where you'll find all of that.